foggy afternoon. A young samurai named Teeshi collapsed in the training yard, not because his body was weak, but because his spirit had been exhausted for a very long time. His teacher, Yamamoto, looked down at him and said a sentence Teeshi would remember for the rest of his life. You're not tired because you train too hard, you're tired because you're carrying what isn't yours. That message wasn't just for Teeshi, it's for modern people. People who work non-stop, sleep enough yet wake up feeling unrested. People who feel drained even on days when they do almost nothing. Have you ever felt that? A heaviness deep in your chest that no amount of sleep can fix. A kind of fatigue that comes from somewhere far below the surface. And yet, hundreds of years ago, Miyamoto Musashi, a man who fought over so many life and death duels, trained relentlessly, created art, wrote Fufi, walked across Japan. Never burned out, never collapsed, never lived in the exhaustion so common today. Why could a warrior living on the edge of death carry boundless energy, while modern humans feel overwhelmed just by a few emails? The truth is this: you're not tired because you do too much. You're tired because you're misaligned. You're tired because you're living two lives at once. The life you truly want, and the life you think others expect from you. Burnout is not a sign you need more sleep. It's a sign you're carrying too many invisible stones. Comparison, self-doubt, expectations, the need to be approved, the fear of disappointing someone. Today we follow Teeshi into Musashi's ancient method of restoring energy, Judo. The way of walking alone. A method not about resting more, but about letting go of what exhausts your spirit. If you've been tired for no reason, if doing more only leaves you emptier, if you want to reclaim the inner strength of a warrior, this video is for you. Before we begin, if you feel like you've found the right place, consider subscribing to Life Philosophy. This isn't just a YouTube channel. It's a community of warriors who choose to walk straight, not in circles, not burdened by unnecessary stones. And if you're ready to start your journey of removing stones, restoring energy, leave a comment. I'm ready to walk straight. Section Mode. The origin of exhaustion. You're not tired because you do too much. You're tired because you carry too many stones. There's a story from Kyoto that the young samurai at the dojo kept repeating for years. The strongest, most disciplined student was the first one to collapse. His name was Teeshi. He lacked no determination. He lacked no hours of practice. Yet every morning, he woke up feeling as if he had already lost a battle in his sleep. It wasn't a physical fatigue. It was something heavier, buried deep in his chest, impossible to explain. Asked him how long he trained all day. Ask him if he slept enough. Yes, ask him if he was sick. So what makes a 18-year-old, full of fire and ambition, burn out in just a few months? The day Teeshi collapsed on the training grounds, Yamamoto, his calm, stern teacher, didn't ask, "Are you hurt?" Instead, he asked a question that cut deeper than any sword. Why, or did you overtrain? Not do you need rest, but why are you tired? Teeshi couldn't answer to him. Exhaustion was the price of greatness. I just want to become the strongest samurai, he said, and I thought being exhausted is part of the journey. Yamamoto shook his head. He picked up a small stone and placed it into Teeshi's hand. You're not tired because you train. You're tired because you carry what isn't yours. Then he placed another stone. This one is the moment you compare yourself to others. Another. This is your fear of looking weak. Another. This is the pressure to make your family proud. Another. This is perfectionism that nobody asked of you. Another. This is the fear of judgment. Another. And this one is the obsession with proving your worth. In less than a minute, Teeshi's hand felt unbearably heavy. Yamamoto asked, "Are you practicing the sword or are you carrying stones?" Teeshi lowered his head. For the first time in his life, he saw a harsh truth. He wasn't living his own life. He was living the life he believed others expected of him, training out of fear, pushing himself out of insecurity, trying desperately not to fall behind. There is no burden heavier than the need to be accepted. Yamamoto pointed at the invisible stones in Teeshi's palm. This is why you're exhausted, not the sword. Then he said the sentence that began Teeshi's lifelong transformation, and one that applies to all of us. You're not burned out because of what you do. You're burned out because of why you do it. If your actions are driven by fear, your energy leaks. If your actions are shaped by other people's opinions, your inner power weakens. If you live to prove yourself, you will always be tired, even before you begin. In that moment, Teeshi realized that exhaustion wasn't a sign he was doing too much. It was a sign he was doing things for the wrong reasons. Musashi, the undefeated warrior, was not powerful because he worked harder. He was powerful because he didn't carry the stones everyone else carried. That day, Teeshi didn't just begin the path of a samurai, he began the path back to himself. Section High, the moment of awakening. when you realize you've been living for the eyes of others. After that training session, when the invisible stones had been placed into his hands, Teeshi returned to his room with a strange feeling, not pain but emptiness. It was as if someone had peeled off the armor he'd worn for years. The armor of image, of family honor, of expectations to be stronger than everyone else. For the first time in his life, Teeshi asked himself a question he had never dared to confront. What do I actually want? That simple question caused the inner world he had built to collapse quietly, because throughout his life, he had never once stopped to listen to himself. Teeshi came to the dojo to become a samurai, but that wasn't truly his dream. He came because his father once failed the samurai exam. He came because relatives always said, if a son of this family becomes a swordsman, the entire clan will be proud. He came because as a child he was told, this boy has talent. One day he will bring honor to our name, but no one ever asked, do you want this turned into pressure? Pressure turned into responsibility, responsibility turned into burden, and burden silently turned into the stones he carried every day. That was why, despite his effort and discipline, Teeshi always felt as though he were walking someone else's path. He didn't run because he wanted to reach the destination. He ran because he feared being left behind. He didn't train to understand himself. He trained to avoid judgment. A life lived to be seen will always be more exhausting than a life lived to grow. That evening, Yamamoto called Teeshi out of his room. No ritual, just a walk to the quiet garden behind the dojo where the sun was sinking, spilling red light across the stones. Sit, the master said. They sat facing each other, listening to the wind brushing through the bamboo. After a long silence, Yamamoto finally asked, Teeshi, do you know why I asked you why you came here? Teeshi shook his head. Yamamoto placed a stone gently onto the ground, soft as a breath. Because a person who doesn't know why he walks will always walk in the wrong direction. Then he looked directly into his student's eyes. You didn't come here to become stronger. You came here to be acknowledged. The sentence struck Teeshi harder than any physical blow. In that moment, he saw himself clearly, standing on an invisible stage, constantly performing strength, discipline, and confidence, just to gain the approval of an audience he could even name. He realized that for years, he had been performing. Who are you holding the sword for? Yamamoto asked. Teeshi didn't answer, not because he didn't know, but because he knew too well, for his father, for his fam honor, for recognition, for the frightened child inside him who believed that worth must be earned through struggle. Yamamoto continued, if your sword is for pleasing others, it will always tremble. If your sword is for running from fear, it will always be heavy. But if your sword is for understanding yourself, you will never run out of energy. A gentle breeze passed through. For the first time, Teeshi felt his shoulders lighten. This was the awakening. He realized he had never walked his own path. Teeshi looked back at his life and saw. Every achievement came from fear of not being enough. Every hour of training came from the need to prove himself. Every compliment lifted him briefly but exhausted him deeply. Every criticism made him double his effort but triple his fatigue. He realized, the soul doesn't tire from doing too much. It tires from doing what is not true to itself. Yamamoto stood, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said softly, tomorrow I will teach you Musashi's method. Not to make you a better fighter, but to make you a true version of yourself. But I must warn you, the teacher added. This method is not for those who want to be seen. It is for those who want to be free. In that moment, all the fears, expectations, comparisons, and judgments rose before Teeshi like shadows. He saw himself standing at a crossroads. One path leading to the approval of others, the other leading to inner freedom, and for the first time in his life he wanted the second path. That night Teeshi didn't sleep, not from anxiety, but because for the first time, he felt like he was about to start living. Not living to be admired, not living to be praised, not living to prove his worth, but living to be himself. His journey began with that simple moment, turning inward, and that is the moment each of us must face if we want to reclaim the energy we've lost. Section Badudo. The way of walking alone, the principle of removing everything useless. The next morning, while dew still clung to the dojo's roof tiles, Yamamoto called Teeshi to the old storage house behind the training yard, a dim, dusty room filled with everything a samurai might need for any journey. Spare swords, armor, ropes, water flasks, blankets, cooking tools, books, calligraphy sets, knives, whetstones. Yamamoto stood in the middle of the room and said, Teeshi, choose everything you think need for 1 year in the mountains. The words 1 year made Teeshi's heart tremble a little, but he didn't question it. He simply began gathering items. A spare sword, 2 sets of clothing, a thick blanket, ropes, a water jug, dried food, brushes and ink, a whetstone, a rain cloak. After 20 minutes, he had piled up enough belongings for what looked like a household move. Yamamoto walked over and studied heap for a long moment. Then he said, "Now remove everything that is not truly necessary." That sentence marked the first step of Teeshi's new path. To simplify in order to return to himself. At first, Teeshi removed a few small items, the extra bowl, the spare rope, a piece of clothing. But Yamamoto shook his head. More. Teeshi removed more. The teacher repeated more. After a while, half the pile was gone. Teeshi thought it was enough, but Yamamoto stepped forward, picked up several items, and set them aside one by one. "You packed this because you're afraid to be without it. This one is out of habit. This one because someone else said it's necessary. And this you brought just to feel safe." Each explanation made Teeshi's face grow warm. He had never realized how many things he clung to, not because they were useful, but because they soothed his insecurity. When the elimination ended, Teeshi was left sword. One set of clothes, one blanket. Yamamoto smiled. "That is enough to begin." Musashi understood something modern humans have forgotten. Energy doesn't come from having more, but from carrying less. Outside, Yamamoto drew two figures on the dirt. One man bent under massive stone, another walking freely with empty hands. He pointed to the first drawing. People today carry too many invisible burdens. Insults, comparisons, fear of judgment, worries about the future, perfectionism that serves no purpose. Then he pointed to the second. Musashi lived like a ghost. He walked across Japan with a single otter trees, traveled barefoot. He carried nothing unnecessary. Teeshi asked softly, "But what does that have to do with energy?" Yamamoto answered without hesitation, "You are not exhausted because of what you do. You are exhausted because of the weight of what you carry. Dudu, the way of walking alone. Not loneliness, but walking without being bent by the expectations of." Yamamoto continued. Dudu doesn't mean avoiding people. It means walking your path without being pulled off by the desires, fears, or voices of others. He tapped the ground 3 times with a bamboo stick. There are 3 things a warrior must let go of before he can find his true energy. Let go of others' expectations. Nothing drains you faster than living for applause. Let go of what is useless. Everything you keep does just take space. It takes energy. Let go of comparison. Someone else's path is not your measure. Each sentence seemed to dissolve a layer of fog inside Teeshi's mind. "But Master, how do I know what is useless?" That question made Yamamoto smile. He bent down, picked a fallen leaf, and said gently, "For every thought, every object, every habit, every relationship, every responsibility, ask one question. Does this serve my path? If the answer is no, then no matter how beautiful, valuable, sentimental, or familiar it is, let it go." Musashi asked himself that every day, Yamamoto said. He removed things one by one, objects, habits, worries, until nothing remained that could pull him away from his purpose. A shift happened inside Teeshi. A new kind of lightness, not a physical lightness, a lightness in the soul. Looking at the 4 belongings left in front of him, he realized something. I have never lived simply. All his life he had been collecting, things to feel safe, goals to feel valuable, expectations to feel loved, achievements to feel worthy. But none of those things made him stronger. They only made him heavier. Teeshi looked up. "Master, what will I learn next?" Yamamoto answered, "Not to acquire more, but to learn how to remove." On that dewy morning, Teeshi understood Musashi's first great lesson. Energy is not found by trying harder. Energy is found by carrying less. And so began his journey into Dudu, the path every person must walk if they wish to reclaim their inner strength. The path of letting go. The first 4 weeks. The energy leaks most people never see after the lesson on Dudo. Yamamoto didn't teach Teeshi sword techniques. No stances, no forms, no advanced movements. Instead, he gave him 4 weekly practices, simple on the surface, yet powerful enough to break a lifetime of exhaustion, practices that most modern people fail without ever realizing why. Week mode. Seeing the 2 cells inside you, Yamamoto gave Teeshi a single instruction for the entire first week. Every time you act, notice whether you're doing it for yourself or for an invisible audience. Teeshi thought it would be easy, but after just a few days he began to fear what he discovered. While training with the sword, his mind whispered, "Do I look strong? Are others noticing my progress? Is the master watching me? While meditating, am I sitting longer than Kenji? Do I appear disciplined? While eating, he worried he might look slow. While working, he feared he wasn't as good as others. From morning until night, every action had a second version of him standing beside it. A performer trying to impress, trying to be seen, trying not to fall behind." At the end of the week, Yamamoto explained, "This is why humans are exhausted. not because of what they do, but because they are always doing it in front of a crowd that doesn't exist. One person performs the action. The other person judges it. Two cells inside one body, and nothing drains energy faster than that inner split. Weak high. Single-pointed action. When full presence becomes a source of power during the second week, Yamamoto gave him a strange rule. Only train when you rest. When we're thinking about what comes next. No comparisons, no performing, just pure action. Teeshi failed instantly. During sword practice, his mind scattered everywhere. Am I doing it right? What will master say? Am I improving fast enough? Yamamoto stopped him. Your body is here, but your mind is running in 10 directions. That split is your biggest energy leak. Then the master demonstrated a single sword cut, not fastful, not flashy, yet the blade moved through the air like a breath, effortless, clean, without resistance. This is action without leakage, Yamamoto said. When Musashi fought, he was only fighting, not thinking about reputation, not planning the next move during the current one, not performing, just striking. Yamamoto explained, was why Musashi never tired. For the first time, Teeshi understood single-pointed action. Not doing less, but doing things with all of himself instead of leaving half his mind scattered across imagined judgments. The comparison trap. The fastest way to destroy your own energy. In week 3, Yamamoto gave him another challenge. Observe your energy around different opponents. The results were shocking. Against stronger students, Teeshi drained quickly. Against weaker ones, he felt energized, Yamamoto explained. You are not fighting them, you are fighting your feelings about them. When sparring with someone better, Teeshi felt inadequate, an energy leak. When sparring with someone weaker, he felt superior, another leak. In both cases, his mind left the present moment. The master introduced a bizarre exercise. Blindfolded sparring, no seeing who was strong, no seeing who reading expressions, no room for comparison, only movement, touch, rhythm. To his surprise, Teeshi's energy stabilized, his body moved freely, no longer dragged down by judgment. Yamamoto concluded, comparison is the quickest way to abandon your own path, weakborn. The first lightness, the feeling we all lost when we grew up. On the morning of the 4th week, something unusual happened. For the first time in years, Teeshi woke up without heaviness in his chest. He wasn't stronger physically, but something inside felt unburdened, all the invisible ropes that used to pull at his mind. Expectation, comparison, judgment, fear, performance, ego, noise were suddenly a little looser. That day he trained with a clarity and presence he had never known. No thoughts of who was watching, no questions about progress, no desire to impress, just the breath, just the present moment. Yamamoto smiled. That is Hoshin Pinchen, the ordinary mind Musashi spoke of. A mind that adds no extra weight to the action. And in that simple, fleeting moment, Teeshi rediscovered something every child once knew, but adults abandoned too early. The lightness of a mind not carrying stones. Section Num. The duel without exhaustion. The first time infinite energy appears by the 4th month. After weeks of training, presence, and alignment, Yamamoto announced an important test. Tomorrow you will fight Hiroshi. The name alone made Teeshi's chest tighten. Hiroshi, the strongest, fastest, most disciplined student in the dojo. For an entire year, Teeshi had never once beaten him. Not only did he lose, he lost while completely drained. In every previous match, 3 minutes in, Teeshi's lungs burned, his hands shook, and his stance fell apart. Hiroshi, meanwhile, stayed light and relaxed as if merely warming up. But this time something felt different. The familiar fear has disappeared. The night before the duel, Teeshi didn't toss and turn like before. He didn't think about winning. He didn't fear losing. He didn't imagine people judging him. He simply sat quietly, sharpening his wooden sword, as if performing a peaceful ritual. No anxiety, no chin, just preparation. For the first time, he understood Yamamoto's words. When the mind no longer splits, energy no longer leaks. The morning of the test, all students gathered in the training yard. Sunlight struck the dusty ground, giving the scene an ancient, sacred stillness. Hiroshi stepped forward with his usual confidence. Teeshi stepped lightly, as if carrying no expectation at all. The duel began. A completely new Teeshi. Hiroshi attacked instantly. No hesitation, no warm-up, no mercy. But Teeshi didn't retreat like before. He shifted his body just enough for the strike to pass, moving with a softness that shocked everyone watching. Not faster, but aligned, flowing with the direction of force instead of resisting it. Students were so calm, as not getting dragged into Hiroshi's rhythm anymore. Hiroshi increased pressure, launching precise, powerful strikes. But Teeshi responded with simplicity, receive, erect, re-step. All in one unified rhythm. Inside, Teeshi felt something he had never known. Nothing to prove. No version of himself he must live up to, only the present moment. Flowing like water. The fall of the strongest warrior. 3 minutes. Hiroshi began breathing heavily. 4 minutes. Tension built in his shoulders. 5 minutes. His footwork slowed. Teeshi was still breathing steadily. 7 minutes. Finally, Hiroshi lowered his sword, gasping, "I need to rest." The entire dojo fell silent. Victory didn't belong to the one who struck hardest. It belonged to the one who didn't run out of energy. Teeshi stood calmly, breathing as if the match had just begun. Something unprecedented had happened. The moment everything became clear, Yamamoto stepped forward and spoke. "You have just witnessed Musashi's secret. Strength, not speed, not TED alignment." He pointed to Hiroshi. Hiroshi fought to win. So his energy was pulled into the future. Then he rested a hand on Teeshi's shoulder. Teeshi fought to be present. So his energy stayed entirely in the now. Then came a sentence that struck every student silent. To fight for victory is exhausting. To be present for life is inexhaustible. Hiroshi bowed his head. Teeshi for the first time understood. Energy is not something you build. It's something you stop losing. The lesson your viewers must remember in every battle of life. Work, relationships, expectations, pressure. We lose not because we are weak, because the mind races ahead of the action. Fear forms before the first step. Comparison begins before the effort we perform. Even in private moments, energy is invested in the future instead of the present. Victory never comes from trying harder. It comes from not leaking. When the mind and action become one, a person becomes a continuous, unbroken flow. Like Musashi, like Teeshi, who, for the first time in his life, did not tire. Section Sao. 3 months in the mountains. The journey of untying the ropes that bind the spirit. Defeating Hiroshi was not the end. It was only an invitation. An opening door to a deeper path where strength, technique, and victory no longer meant anything. Right after the duel, Yamamoto called Teeshi aside. "You have seen how energy becomes limitless when the mind stops splitting. Now it's time to learn how to maintain that state in complete stillness." And so the next challenge began. 3 months in the mountains. No friends, no noise. Only wind, stone breath, and oneself. The temple hidden in the clouds. 2 days later, Teeshi arrived at Regan Temple, an ancient monastery wrapped in white mist. Master Hakyum, an old monk with eyes that seemed to see straight into one's soul, greeted him with a simple smile. "Yamamoto says you're learning Judo. Good. Here you will learn why you must walk alone." One sentence, but it pierced in the deepest part of Teeshi's mind. The strict routine that burned away the restless mind. On the first day, Teeshi received his schedule. Bazar AM, wake Bazobamu AM. Cold water purification Bunza AM. Zazen meditation. Souza Aya, walking meditation Beza AM. Labor, carrying water, chopping wood, sweeping Muimutza AM. Silent lunch Mihaiza BM. Scripture study Haiza BM. Meditation high hours. Bunza Bayan afternoon chores Souza BM. Simple dinner Beza BM. Journaling Tamza BM. Sleep no variation, no adjustment. The first week felt like a war against himself. Not because the work was hard, not because of lack of sleep, but because changed. Nothing excited the mind. Nothing fed the craving for stimulation. For the first time, Teeshi realized he was addicted to stimulation. Addicted to always doing something. And that very addiction had been draining his energy for years. The silent resistance that exhausts more than battle. In the 3rd week, as Teeshi carried buckets of water, he muttered, "I came here to learn the warrior's way, not to haul water." Hakyun heard him. He placed a gentle hand on Teeshi's shoulder and said, "That sentence is what exhausts you." Then the old monk lifted a bucket of water and walked as if it weighed nothing. No complaining, no wishing for something else, no escaping the moment, just carrying water. Mindfully, Hakyun explained, "When you wish you were elsewhere, your mind splits in two. One part stays here. The other part runs away. Your energy leaks through the crack between them." At that moment, something clicked inside Teeshi. It isn't the work that drains you, it's the resistance to the work. The deepest lesson arrives in silence. In the 2nd month. During a morning meditation session, something profound occurred. The noisy mind, the one that constantly pushed, compared, feared, imagined, simply dissolved. Not suppressed, not control, it just settled like a lake after a violent storm. In that stillness, a truth rose as a thought, but as something undeniable. Energy does not come from the world. It comes from the way you stand in front of the world. It is not life that makes humans tired, is comparisonment. Resistance, performing for others. Rejecting the present moment, forcing oneself to become what one is not yet. In the silence of meditation, Teeshi felt as if Musashi himself was whispering, "People grow tired because they carry too many things that do not belong to their path." And finally, Teeshi understood, stillness is not the absence of movement. Stillness is the absence of self-conflict. The day energy returned, not because of rest, but because of release. By the third month, everything changed. Teeshi woke for the temple bell. No heaviness, no mental fog, no resistance. He carried water for hours without strain, swept the courtyard without irritation, sat in meditation without struggling against his thoughts, not because his body got stronger, but because his mind stopped fighting reality. Energy no longer leaked through anxiety, expectation, performance, or fear. For the first time in his life, he worked without carrying stones in his heart. Before Teeshi left the monastery, Hakyun said one final sentence. "You did not come here to learn more. You came here to carry less." A single sentence. Yet it revealed the core of all strength. True power comes not from adding, but from releasing. Section B. The final confrontation. A victory not won by force, but by alignment of the mind. After 3 months in the mountains, Teeshi returned to the dojo. He was no longer the anxious student who tried to prove himself at every turn. He returned light like a passing breeze. No boasting, no rush, no expectations clinging to him. That afternoon Yamamoto summoned him. The master's face grew solemn. "Tomorrow morning you will face your final test, not sparring. Not a technical examination, but real combat." Teeshi remained silent. Yamamoto continued. "A Ronin has been terrorizing several nearby villages. 3 samurai attempted to stop him. 2 were gravely injured. Local authorities asked for help." Then the master looked deeply into Teeshi's eyes. "I choose you. Not because he was the strongest, but because he was the lightest. No stones in his heart ego, no fear." The night before battle, an unfamiliar calm. Once, Teeshi would have spent a night like this, trembling with fear. Imagine himself losing. Imagining himself dying. Imagining that he would disappoint his master. But tonight he simply sat. Sharpened his sword slowly. Let each sound of the whetstone fall like a breath. No shaking. No panic. No racing preparation. Full, steady, without leaks. Hakyun's teaching echoed. Stillness isn't the absence of movement. Stillness is the absence in a resistance. The fated morning, where life and death meet, villagers gathered in the square. At the center stood a tall, imposing man with a ferocious gaze. Nakamura, a notorious Ronin, he had defeated many seasoned fighters. His strikes were lethal, fast, and merciless. Teeshi stepped forward. Not slowly, simply in rhythm. His breathing calm as a dawn lake. Nakamura smirked. "Kid, you'll die fast." Teeshi did not respond, not because of arrogance, but because he had nothing to defend. No pride, no reputation, no self-image. The battle begins, and from the first second, the difference is clear. Nakamura rushed in with deadly intent. A typical samurai would panic. A novice would freeze. A prideful fighter would counter recklessly. But Teeshi did nothing unnecessary. He responded. A precise backward step. A clean angle flexion. Not faster, not stronger. Nakamura kept attacking. Each strike meant to kill, but Teeshi never met force with force. He redirected it. As water avoids a stronger current without ever losing its nature. The truth emerges. One man drains himself. The other remains untouched. After 5 minutes, Nakamura's breath turned ragged. After 7, his shoulders began to sag. After 10, sweat poured down his face and his footing faltered. Meanwhile, Teeshi still breathed as he did during morning meditation, not because he was physically superior, not because his technique was perfect, but because he didn't fear losing, he didn't crave winning, he wasn't performing for the crowd, he projecting himself into the future, he wasn't protecting an ego, he was simply here in this moment. Presence always consumes less energy than ambition. The finishing moment, and Musashi's deepest lesson, unfolds when Nakamura overextended on a reckless strike. Teeshi stepped aside, turned his wrist, and disarmed him in a single movement. One strike, no cruelty, no excess. Nakamura collapsed to his knees. Why aren't you tired?" Teeshi answered with a clarity he had never known. "I wasn't fighting you. I was fighting this moment. You pulled all your energy into the future trying to win. I kept all mine right here." The entire square fell silent. Recognition arrives not from victory, but from understanding. Yamamoto stepped forward and addressed the students. This is why Musashi survived 60 life and death duels without exhaustion. He never fought the opponent. He fought the fragmentation inside himself. Then the master delivered the revelation that shook the dojo. Fatigue does not come from what we do. Fatigue comes from what we resist. Teeshi bowed, no pro-triumph, only a quiet realization. Energy is freedom, and freedom begins the moment you stop carrying stones inside your chest. Section time, when victory no longer matters. The moment Teeshi sees his new self and Nakamura was defeated, the villagers cheered. Some rushed in to thank Teeshi. Children looked at him the way people look at a hero. Yet strangely, Teeshi didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel proud. He didn't feel superior. What he felt was a vast silence, clean calm, expanding quietly inside his chest. Like a huge stone had finally fallen away, no excitement. No adrenaline rush, no intoxicating sense of triumph. Only lightness. And in that stillness, he understood something. The purpose of the warrior's path isn't to defeat others, but to defeat oneself. Yamamoto says a sentence Teeshi will never forget. That evening, when the dojo courtyard grew quiet, Yamamoto called in. The master didn't praise him, didn't hug him, didn't make grand statements. He simply said, "I'm not proud because you won." Teeshi lifted his head, confused. Yamamoto's eyes softened as he looked toward the mountains. "I'm proud because in that battle, you never lost yourself." Only then did Teeshi fully grasp the meaning. Some people win, but their hearts lose. Some defeat their opponent, but are defeated by ego, arrogance, or excitement. But Teeshi, he stepped out of battle with his mind still aligned, unshaken by fear or victory. Liberation doesn't come from skill, but from what you no longer carry. That night, Teeshi walked alone to the river behind the dojo. Moonlight shimmered on the water. The breeze brushed across the surface, soft ripples spreading like the universe inhaling. He picked up a heavy stone and tossed it in. Water splashed. Then returned to stillness as if nothing had disturbed it. He smiled. "My strength didn't grow that much," he whispered to himself. "But the weight I carried has grown much smaller." No fear of judgment, no fear of failure. No voice in his head screaming for control. When the unnecessary falls away, the space left behind becomes an infinite reservoir of energy. And that was the true gift of his 3 months in the mountains. The warrior's awakening. "I no longer need to prove anything." Thinking of the version of himself who first entered the dojo, Teeshi felt a quiet compassion. Always wanting to be strong, always wanting approval, always comparing, always chasing imagined futures, always afraid of being seen as weak. Now he saw all of that for what it truly was. The shadow cast by ego. The bigger the ego, the longer the shadow. The longer the shadow, the step. But when ego shrinks, light enters, shadow fades, and the path becomes light again. Teeshi realized, a true warrior doesn't come to conquer everyone. A true warrior comes to free himself. Inner chains born. The moment Teeshi discovers the most important thing in life, suddenly a question surfaced inside him. If tomorrow I disappear, what do I want people to remember about me? The answer came instantly. Not samurai reputation, not today's victory, but the state of his heart, calm even with a blade at his throat, his way of living, not chasing noise but walking his own path, his presence, whole grounded in each moment. Teeshi understood. The greatest victory realizing you no longer need victory, because once the mind stops running toward the future, energy returns to the present. And that is when a person is truly powerful. The end of a battle. The beginning of a new life. When the moon reached the peak of the sky, Teeshi stood up, brushed the dust off his clothes, and walked back toward the dojo, not fast, steady, as if the very ground was lifting him forward. Tomorrow new challenges would come, but tonight, he knew he had crossed a threshold of life. A Teeshi who no longer fought to prove himself. A Teeshi who no longer feared the future. A Teeshi who no longer carried stones inside. Only a person who had finally understood himself, and that is the only victory that truly matters. Section 10. Discipline is not effort. When IT becomes an identity a few weeks after the battle, life in the dojo returned to its quiet rhythm. No more whispers, no tension in the air. Students trained as usual, each following their own pace, but for Teeshi, something had fundamentally changed. He no longer trained to improve, no longer practiced to get stronger, no longer aimed to surpass anyone. Every morning he woke before sunrise, swept the courtyard, chopped wood, practiced sword forms, meditated, and wrote in his journal. No rushing, no dependence on motivation. What once required discipline had now become his natural way of being. The day Teeshi realized, him no longer trying. One morning, as the first light warmed the dojo roof, Yamamoto watched from a distance while Teeshi practiced his forms. There was no tension in his movements, no striving, no hint of performance. His breath matched each motion matched the air matched the stillness around him. When he finished, Yamamoto approached. "Do you feel different?" Teeshi answered softly, "I think I don't have to force myself anymore." Yamamoto smiled. "That means discipline has become your identity." Then he said a line Teeshi would never forget. "When you must force yourself, you live on borrowed strength. When discipline becomes natural, you live from your own energy high." Why people feel exhausted? Not from the work, but from the mind resisting the work. There were days when Teeshi did countless tasks. Sword practice, sweeping floors, helping villagers, endurance drills, deep meditation, writing reflections, yet strangely, he didn't feel tired. Not because his body had become steel, but because his mind no longer resisted, his mind no longer whispered, "This is tiring." Why do I have to do this? I don't feel like it. Maybe tomorrow. Once resistance dissolved, something else took its place, pure presence. It wasn't the work that drained him. It was the inner argument against the work. Teeshi finally understood Musashi's wisdom. The strong are not those who do more. The strong are those who lost energy doing it. A new identity. From a frightened boy to someone who lives by the way. That night, while sitting in meditation in the quiet dojo, Teeshi reflected on his journey. From a boy filled with anxiety, living in comparison and fear, to a student desperate to prove himself, to a warrior who could fight without inner turmoil, and finally a human being living with his own inner rhythm. No force in chasing recognition, no fear of judgment. He realized, discipline is when you force yourself to live correctly. The way is when you naturally live correctly. When discipline becomes the way, the gap between you want to do and what you must do disappears. Everything becomes part of the flow born. The awakening, my true self, is actually very simple. One day while walking past the temple pond, Teeshi saw the water still as glass. He looked into it. He no longer saw tension in his eyes, no more hidden fear, no more ego trying to prove anything, only a calm face, as if he had stepped out of chows and into clarity. He whispered, "So this is my true self, simple in move breath, simple in thought, not living less, but living without excess, not abandoning dreams, but abandoning fear, not doing fewer tasks, but doing without carrying emotional weight numb." The final philosophy of Parchin, discipline is not the bridge to freedom. Discipline is freedom. As sunset stretched red light across the training grounds, Teeshi stood with his hand resting lightly on his sword. Not as a weapon, but as a reminder. True strength is not in winning. True strength is in being aligned anytime, no forcing, no overthinking, just living in accordance with your inner path. And that is the moment discipline becomes who you are. Section Mue, the final transformation. When you stop straining, you start living. One late autumn afternoon, as the forest began to change color and the air carried the first cold of the season, Teeshi sat alone under the dojo's wooden eaves. The sky was pale gold, clouds drifting slowly like a long exhale. No clashing swords, no test to prepare for, no commands from his master, only stillness, clear and calm like lake without ripples. And that was when he finally understood something profoundly simple. People don't burn out because life is heavy. People burn out because they carry what was never theirs. He thought back to who he was a year ago, living for approval, training for praise, fighting to avoid being looked down on, striving to appear good enough in others' eyes, and now, looking that version of himself, he saw a truth light as air. A person's energy doesn't come from muscle or willpower. It comes from simplicity, from alignment between mind, intention, and action mode. The moment Teeshi had why Musashi never burned out. Many believed Musashi was unstoppable because he trained relentlessly. But no, Musashi was unstoppable because he never let his mind scatter. Most people exhaust themselves by wanting too much. Musashi stayed powerful because he wanted less. Most people drain themselves fighting life. Musashi conserved energy by moving with life. Teeshi finally understood, what exhausts me is not the work itself, it's the mindset I bring into the work. He no longer practiced sword forms to prove himself. He practiced because it was his path. He no longer meditated to appear more enlightened. He meditated because his mind needed quiet. He no longer worked to earn recognition. He worked because a warrior axe is who he is. When intention becomes pure, energy becomes infinite high. When life stops running, you finally see your straight path. One day Yamamoto asked, "What do you think exhausts people the most?" Teeshi replied, "They run without knowing where they're running to." Yamamoto nodded. Exactly. The most tired person is not the one who works the hardest. It's the one who runs in circles in the dark. That single line closed Teeshi's one-year transformation. From someone chasing others' approval to someone walking firmly on his own path. He realized, when you know where you're going, every step feels lighter. The final message for people today. If Musashi lived in the modern world, he would say, you don't need more energy. You need fewer leaks. Energy leaks when you compare yourself. Energy leaks when you try to please everyone. Energy leaks when you live by society's expectations. Energy leaks when your mind is elsewhere while your hands do something else. Burnout doesn't come from life being too hard. It comes from living misaligned, running in circles instead of walking your own straight path. And one day, just like Teeshi, you will discover, when you strain less, you live more. When you rush less, the path becomes clear. When you need less, you become stronger. A message to you watching this video. If you feel tired, burned out, or directionless, pause and ask yourself, how many things am I carrying that were never mine? How many actions do I take just to be liked? Is the path on truly mine? If this video resonated with you, I invite you to comment one thing you will put down starting to it. A comparison, a mental burn thing, but it could change your entire direction. And if you want more lessons like this, more stories that help you return to your own straight path, follow the Life Philosophy channel for more journeys into clarity, discipline, and inner strength. See you in the next video, where we continue walking with Musashi, with the great thinkers and warriors across time, to learn how to live less exhausted, less distracted, and far more alive. Because life is not a race. Life is a straight path made only for you, and the only thing you must learn is to walk it without carrying stones that don't belong to you. See you soon.